Hey there, it's Jeff from Hot Tub Owner HQ, and I know it's been a long time since I've done a video. My apologies. I'm doing one today though, in the rain, and it's not even on my hot tub. It's on that one right there. And it's got a leak at the heating tube essentially, and I'm gonna show you the cause of the leak, and then we're gonna fix it together in real time. Let's get started. The issue is with this part right here. This is the new part. This is a union fitting that goes on either side of the heating tube, and it's called a split nut because there's a Phillips head screw right there and one right there, and you can basically split this thing in half, which allows us to put it on without having to disassemble the heating tube from the plumbing system, which is really handy. You're not likely to find this at a big box hardware store or your local hardware store, so you're probably going to have to order this online. You could do that from SpaDepot.com or Amazon or lots of different places. They're not expensive. I'm also going to replace this rubber washer, this rubber gasket. These fail very easily, and if you ever have a leak from your heating tube, it's most likely this rubber gasket that's failed. It's actually kind of unusual for this fitting itself to fail, but the one that was on here actually literally cracked in half right down the middle there. I'm gonna replace both of them though, just in case the other one is on the verge of failing also. It should be a relatively quick fix, but I don't wanna jinx myself, right? So let's get going. All right, so this union fitting is gonna go right here, where this PVC tube meets the heating tube. And of course the power is off on this hot tub, and because the leak was so bad, it's actually empty as well. Now this thing will just pop in half, just like that. I'm going to fit it around either side of this. The threaded side is going to go away from the heater tube. The heater tube is the silver thing right here. So I'm going to put that on there, and then I'm going to put the screws back once I have it in place. Then I'm going to thread it up snug with the grooves on the PVC pipe. Let's do that now. Okay, now this particular hot tub has been sitting empty for a while. I'm not sure how long exactly. I got asked recently to take a look at this and see if I could fix it. It's also pretty dirty. So I've got to get that cleaned up before I can fill it up and test to see if the leak fix we did with the union fittings is gonna hold. So let's get this thing cleaned up now, and then we'll fill it up. I'm going to use my handy wet dry vac to get rid of most of this excess water, but some of this large debris and branches I'm unfortunately going to have to remove by hand. But let's get rid of the water first. Okay, as you can see, I've got a lot of the water out, most of it, and I've got all the big sticks and branches out. I'm going to see now if I can get most of the rest of this up again with my wet dry vac. And then we're going to have to go through it manually with a rag to kind of get the rest of the dirt and debris out before we can begin to fill this thing up. If there are a little bit of particles still floating in the water, that's okay. The filtration system over here is designed to take care of little particles. It's not going to get rid of this big debris though. I'm going to have to do that by hand. I've done about as much as I can do with the wet dry vac. Now I'm just going to have to go through here by hand with a rag and get this cleaned up before we can fill it up. But before I do that, I am going to kind of clean up this filter area a little bit with the wet dry vac, because you can see there's a little bit of dirty water and a lot of leaves and debris right there. So let's do that before we start to wipe with the rag. I also usually find it easier to kind of clean from the top down, so that if I do end up with a lot of debris, it's going to be at the bottom, and then I can use my wet dry vac again to get the rest of that out. Also, I usually take off my shoes, and so I'm just wearing socks when I'm walking around inside the hot tub. That way, I'm not leaving muddy footprints and making extra work for myself. Okay, as you can see, it's looking pretty good. What I'm gonna do now, though, might seem a little counterintuitive. I'm actually gonna give this a quick rinse and see if I can rinse all the remaining debris, of which there is a little bit, down to this center well, and then I'm gonna use my wet dry vac again to get that out. I don't mind tiny little bits because they will get caught in the filters, but any large pieces of debris I would end up having to scoop out with a net. So I'd rather get rid of that now. Let's do that. And as you can see, there's definitely some debris that would have just come to the surface floating had I not done that. So now I'm going to use the wet dry vac again to get rid of this, and then we're ready to fill it up. Okay, as you can see, this thing is pretty clean, and we're ready to fill it up and make sure that our union fitting is leak proof. Let's do it. All right, so as you can see, it is starting to fill up. Typically a hot tub of this size will take probably a little under an hour to fill up. Once it gets kind of to the jet level, I typically would turn the power on so it can start to heat, because typically a hot tub like this is going to take at least 8 hours to heat up. Now in this particular case, that's not crucial. This house is for sale, and the people that are coming to look at it won't be here for another 2 days, so it's not a big deal if it's not ready to go tonight. But do plan on it taking about 8 hours for a normal 220 volt hot tub to heat up, and like I said, about an hour to fill up. And I don't know if you can tell, but it does look like I'm going to need to come back with a net probably and scoop out some of this debris. The filtration system will definitely get some of it, but probably not all of it. I do also want to point out that the union nut that we replaced, we're not going to be able to tell if there's a leak there until the heater and the pump are on, most likely, unless it was a really bad leak. So I am going to go ahead and close the cover and then turn the power on, since the water level is above the intake valves. That's these things right here. So that's where the water goes into the system. And as you see, the jets go up on the walls of this hot tub pretty high. And if I turn the power on, chances are at least some of those will turn on as the filtration system kicks in. And I don't want to get any more wet than I've already gotten replacing this and cleaning this in the rain. So I'm going to go ahead and close the cover and then cut the power on so it can begin to test the pump and the heater, and then we can look for evidence of a leak. Typically, hot tubs are going to have what they call a disconnect box, usually within 5 feet of the hot tub. And sure enough, here on the outside of the deck that the hot tub is on, I see the disconnect box, although this is not a typical one. There's basically a switch right there that gets flipped upside down to turn the power off. So it's not a normal breaker. I've got to pull that out and flip it the other way. Let's do that now. So as you can see, when it's turned this way, it's off. And when it's turned this way, it's on. So I've just got to take it from that to that and put it back in. What I'm noticing, unfortunately, is that the panel did not come on when I flipped that breaker on, which may mean that there might be another breaker on the main breaker panel to this house that also needs to be flipped. But I've never been to this house prior to yesterday, and I'm not quite sure where that is, so we're going to have to locate it. Okay. The main breaker panel was indeed flipped. So now let's take a look, now that everything is on and pumping. Let's take a look and see if we see any signs of a leak where those union fittings are. So right there, we see the union fitting on the right side, no water underneath. It's worth pointing out that when I first turned the system on, the jets did indeed start to spray. So you can kind of see some water here on the side. So there is some residual water there. But again, I don't see any water underneath the union fittings on the inside of the hot tub. So I think we're good to go. But as you can see here, the water is definitely still a little bit dirty. I'm definitely going to have to come back with a scoop net and get some of this debris out. The filtration system will help clean that up a little bit. I'm also going to hyperchlorinate the water, which will help get rid of some of this cloudiness. And of course, we need to test for pH and alkalinity. Okay, as you can see, hot tub's nice and full, starting to heat up here. Overall, this was a pretty successful job, I'd say. I do need to come back probably with a net and clean up some of the debris a little bit, but I'll be interested to see how much of it the filtration system actually catches. Now, when you first set up a hot tub, when you first fill it up, there are some definite do's and don'ts about what to do with the water. Do you need to shock it? What about pH, alkalinity, all that? If you're unsure of what to do when you first fill up a hot tub, I want you to check out this video on my channel right up here. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.